the community.
Hey, Equity Mate.
Hi, I just had a question.
Hey, Bryce, friend. I've got a question.
Your question answered.
We're going to check in on where ethical investing is up to, and it's been driven by a question that's come in from a community member, Sass.
Hi guys, I love your content and also your book. I think it would be really cool if you could do an ETF explained episode on an ethical ETF such as BetaShares DZZF, Ethical Diversified. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sass, for the question and for reading the book. Shameless plug for the book whenever we get the chance. Yes. Don't stress, just invest wherever you buy books. But we thought this would be a good opportunity to check in on ethical investing because there's no doubt it was the biggest topic of the moment 3 or 4 years ago. We got so many questions about it, but we certainly get less questions about it now. But there's a number of ethical products out there. So it's worth us checking in and seeing what the state of ethical investing is and giving people a quick primer if they're not familiar with this part of the market.
Well, let's rewind, Ren. 2019 sort of through to 2021 was, as you said, when we noticed, and I think globally there was just a huge increase in the demand for and also the products hitting the market that were pitched as ethical investing. Yeah. The whole doing good and doing well in terms of the returns that you were able to get through ethical investing was sort of the message that was out there at the time. And the Equity Mates community members were all over it. We couldn't talk enough about ESG.
Yeah, and I think that doing good and doing well, it rang true because at that point in time, ethical funds were doing as well as the index.
Yeah.
And in many cases were actually doing like half a point or a percentage point better than the index. Yeah. So that point was really strongly emphasized. And then 2022 happened.
Then 2022 hit. So firstly, we had the energy crisis once Russia and Ukraine kicked off, and that sent fossil fuels stocks skyward. I think everyone then started pouring back into those types of investments as it was absolutely printing money.
Yeah, it was fossil, it was American oil stocks, but it was also like Australian coal stocks had a real moment.
Everything. And the return profile of those versus ESG really started to diverge. We also had issues around underperformance because of that with ESG funds. There was an anti-woke backlash in the US, and there were a number of greenwashing scandals that started to come out, which is effectively where funds or products said one thing when it came to ESG, but the reality is their underlying investment strategy didn't actually match what they were saying. And so that really sort of poured a little bit of cold water on the trust in across the industry.
Yeah, in Australia, Vanguard, they were subject to the highest penalty ever for greenwashing, $12.9 million after ASIC took a case against them. And I think, when people saw the name Vanguard associated with greenwashing, it created a level of skepticism around the whole space.
Yeah. So that sort of brings us to where we are now, 2025. Dust has somewhat settled across the board. ESG certainly isn't the hottest trend as it was, but it is still here. It still remains. I guess trust is slowly starting to come back into the market. So about $1.5 trillion is invested in what I guess you could term as responsible investments here in Australia. The language is now more about sustainable investing, value-based investing, and no doubt that it's starting to pick back up a little bit here in Australia.
All right, so that's kind of the last 5 years' history. Let's get into what you need to understand about ESG investing, and then we'll close with
DZZF.
DZZF and performance. So when it comes to ESG investing, sustainable investing, responsible investing, whatever you want to call it, there's really two approaches that you need to be aware of. One is a negative screen and one is a positive screen. Negative screen is certainly, well, at least for the products available to us, we see more of it.
Yeah.
And so that is, we are going to exclude companies that don't meet our sustainability criteria, whatever that may be. And that's an important thing to stress, that manager to manager sustainability criteria does differ.
Yeah.
Famously, BetaShares back in like pre-COVID, I think they excluded Meta from their ESG funds.
Sustainability leaders.
Yeah, and that was sort of controversial because everyone else had Meta and they didn't. And so it is important to look under the hood if you want to invest ethically, because there is a wide divergence sometimes in what's ethical and what's not ethical. But at a principal level, negative screen says we have a criteria and we're going to exclude companies that don't meet that criteria. And so the obvious and easy ones are like fossil fuel companies or companies that sell weapons or, whatever else. And so then you just reconstruct the index, like you take the US index, but you've excluded Exxon from, the top of that index or near the top of that index. So that's a negative screen. A positive screen is where you invest in companies that are making a positive impact. And that might be a company that is sustainable already, or it might be a company that is currently not sustainable, but is working to turn their operations around, or is a company that is the most sustainable in an unsustainable industry. Yeah. So there are again, different ways to do it, but the logic there is what you want to do is support the companies that may not meet your criteria today, but you want to give them the capital and the support to change.
Yeah.
That it's all about investing in the change rather than having a black and white set of criteria.
Yes.
And only investing in companies that meet that criteria today. So that's positive screen, negative screen. And then you sometimes get hybrids of the two where they'll exclude whole industries, but then pick ESG leaders from remaining industries. But yeah, if you keep that positive, negative screen in mind, you'll go a long way to understanding your different options out there.
And as you said, so subjective in parts of it.
So subjective,
you think. It's important as an investor, you need to ensure that just because they say ESG and sustainability, it aligns with what you believe that is.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's turn to Sass's question, which was asking us to have a look at...
a long run-up to actually answering Sass's question.
Sorry about that, Sass. But we thought it was important. She wants to know about DZZF.
Yes.
So this is the BetaShares Ethical Diversified High Growth ETF, one of Australia's largest ethical ETFs, and it is an all-in-one ETF. Now, what that means is underlying it is a number of ETFs that use BetaShares RIAA certified ethical ETFs as building blocks. Now, these are ETFs that have positive climate change leadership screens. So there's your positive, and also broader ESG criteria. So this is a blend. They use negative screenings and also positive screening as well in the underlying ETFs. In terms of the breakdown of assets, you've got 90% growth, 10% defensive, and that's broken down by about 54% international exposure, 36% Aussie, and then that 10% is in global and Aussie bonds.
Let's get to the performance question. How's DZZF gone? Now, you would think there is a natural comparator, which is DHHF, the BetaShares All Growth ETF, similar ticker, but that's 100% shares, whereas DZZF is 90% equities, 10% bonds.
Yeah.
So what we actually think the better comparator is the Vanguard Diversified High Growth ETF, VDHG. So a lot of codes going on here. So
because it's 90-10, same split.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're comparing BetaShares DZZF, which is 90-10, with Vanguard VDHG, which is also 90-10. Now, DZZF, its inception date was 15th of December 2020. So it's been going for just shy of 5 years. Since inception, it's returned 9.5% per annum. If you look at Vanguard's VDHG over 5 years, it's returned 12.3% per annum over that 5-year period. That is meaningful underperformance. It's almost 3 percentage points a year difference.
Yeah. It's pretty much like what value do you put on being invested ethically? That's the cost, essentially, of making an ethical investment decision. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think just be very aware that by excluding fossil fuels, gambling, weapons, tobacco, but there's also positive screening in there as well, you're probably taking out a lot of companies that have driven the growth over the last 5 years.
Well, yeah, you have, because you've underperformed. Yeah. I think it's important to stress that we've picked a moment in time.
Yeah.
And that moment in time included some pretty good times for fossil fuel industries.
Fuels.
And there will be other moments in time where it's the opposite, like that sort of 2018 to 2021 period where there was a lot of optimism around renewable energy stocks, and I guess a lot of the opposite of optimism, pessimism around fossil fuel stocks, and so they underperformed, and so it was good to exclude them. So we have to acknowledge that we've picked a moment in time, and you pick different moments in time the results may be different. But I guess we can only operate with the information we've got and the track record that this fund has, and it has meaningfully underperformed.
Big time. Put that in a compound calculator and do that over 40 years.
Well, should we do that to close this episode out?
Pretty good. Yeah. Well, while you plug that in, I'll just remind everyone that as we wrap the end of this episode, if you would love to, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a rating and a review in your podcast app. Should take you no more than 30 seconds, but we love getting your feedback. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, leave a comment below. We love hearing from you in the YouTube comments. And if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, we would really, really appreciate it. All right, Ren, well, to close out, what is the difference?
So I did $100 a week for 35 years, the average length, like the length of a career. 9% a year, $1.12 million.
Okay.
I mean, that's still pretty good. Invest small amounts consistently over your working life, you can become a millionaire. That's the message. So 1.12, but bump it up to 12%. And you get 2.25.
Oh, more than double.
Yeah.
Wow,
so those small percentage changes in fees, small percentage changes in returns, compounded over an investing lifetime can really add up. And so, Sass, to answer your question, I would say think long and hard about the investment choice you want to make.
Yes.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.